Hey YouTube, it's your girl Dr. J, and I thought I would do a video to address a question that I get asked quite a bit, and that is, what math program do I use, or what math program would I recommend for people? And what I want to do is talk about some questions that you can answer to try to find what's going to be the best math curriculum fit for your family. I will preface this by saying that most homeschool families, they're going to use they may use a curriculum, but they're probably going to be adding things in to that curriculum that's going to meet the needs of their family. But answering these questions is going to give you a good start for finding what's going to be a better fit, and then there'll be less tweaking that you have to do down the road. One of the fundamental questions that you're going to want to answer is it going to be better for your child to use a mastery-based program or a spiral-based program? And the difference in those is that with a mastery-based program, your child will stay on a topic until that topic is mastered with some depth before they move on to something else. And so let's say your child is learning two-digit addition, and it might start with two-digit addition with no carrying, and then two-digit addition with carrying, and then you'll move on to three-digit addition, and then four-digit addition. But basically, they're going to stay on addition until they pretty much know that topic solidly, and then you move on to something new, and you may not come back to review that addition. It may be a component of some word problems or other aspects of the curriculum down the road, but it's not going to be a set-in review of that topic. Spiral-based is kind of like a spiral staircase, where you're gonna do a topic and stay on that topic for some mastery, and then you're going to move on to a different topic. So you may do two-digit addition with carrying for a little bit, and then that curriculum is going to move on, and you may move on to something like two-digit subtraction with borrowing, okay? And then you'll move on to various topics, and then after a while you're going to spiral back to addition, and then when you spiral back to addition, it may now be three-digit addition with carrying. So you're going to hit a topic, go to just a little bit of depth, and then come back to that topic a little bit later. And so how to know if your child is going to do better with mastery versus spiraling is, does your child like to stay on something until they really understand it? Or does your child really like to kind of play with things for a little while and then move on? Another thing that may influence that decision is, does your child learn something and they may know something, relatively well one week, and then you may ask them a question about it a couple weeks later, and because they haven't dealt with it and played with it, they may have forgotten some of those components. If your child is one where they may forget some components, or they really like to change things up quite a bit, then a spiral method is going to be better for you. If your child really likes to know something deeply, they want to stay on something until they truly get it, and they tend to remember the things that they learn, and even if they don't play with those concepts for a week or two or a month, they still got it because they were able to learn it deeply, then a mastery-based approach may be something that's going to be better for you. So that's one of those kind of fundamental questions. Now, sometimes people assume that a mastery approach might be for a slower curriculum, and a spiral approach is going to be for a faster curriculum, but that's actually not the case. There are some mastery-based curriculums that are for very mathy kids, and there's some that's going to be a more traditional pace, and then there's some that are going to be a slower pace for kids that need a little bit more time with the topic. And that's going to be the same for a spiral base. There's going to be some that move very quickly, and they're for kids that are mathy, and then there's going to be a lot more for kids that learn at a more traditional pace, and then those spiral programs that are going to be for kids that need a little bit more time with the concept. So mastery versus spiral is going to be one of those first decisions that you make. Another decision that has to do with learning style is, does your child really like learning from a textbook, learning from a workbook, or learning online and with videos. Okay, that's another decision, because if your child just absolutely hates workbooks and seeing a workbook makes them weep, then it doesn't matter that they may like the spiral approach of Singapore. The Singapore math is workbook based, and so they may get a little frustrated with that, so you wouldn't make that choice. Some kids really enjoy textbooks, especially textbooks that have a lot of detail and explanations. Others, when they see a textbook, they just want to run the other way. For some kids, if they really enjoy learning online, and it feels good, it feels natural, they love it. Other kids, they just really can't take the pace, or they really don't like to learn online. They really want to see the book, feel the book, write in the book, be able to come back and see concepts that they had worked on earlier. And so if your child does really well with the online approach and they enjoy it, then again, you would look for an online class that was either mastery based or spiral based. If your child loves workbooks or doesn't mind workbooks, again, you can look at a workbook based curriculum. It's going to be, sometimes they tend to be a little on the cheaper side, because they're going to be consumable, so you won't be able to pass them down. But if you can only buy your curriculum a little bit at a time, that may be an option. But if your child is one where a consumable book maybe wouldn't work, because they like their paper to look perfect, and so they are going to want to, a new fresh page once they've worked things out. They don't want to show all their erasing and different things like that. So then a consumable workbook probably isn't going to be the best choice. You may want to look at a textbook, and then they just write their answers in the notebook, that sort of thing. So what's their learning style? Do they like online learning where they're working at a computer? Do they want a textbook? Are they okay with workbooks? So that's going to be the next approach. How is that math going to be delivered? Another big thing you want to look at is your child really visual versus auditory versus, they like to work things out, because there are some kids that they're visual. If your child is extremely visual, then it might be that a online course or a computer-based course might be a better fit, because they tend to use a lot more visuals than you would traditionally find in a textbook or workbook, just because color print costs a lot. And so if you use a textbook or workbook, it may not have as much color, as much visual texture as what you may find in an online class. If your child is kinesthetic, they like to learn by doing, touching, feeling things, then you may want to look for a program that's going to have a manipulative component, or look for ways that you can add manipulatives in. So what type of learner is your child? Next, is your child mathy or a more traditional learner, or are they a child that needs to take a little bit more time with math concepts? This is actually probably one of the biggest factors, I think, when choosing a curriculum. And sometimes people wonder, well, how do I know if my child is mathy? Now, your child getting the right answers doesn't necessarily denote to whether or not they're mathy. One of the best ways to determine if a child is really mathy, if they just get math concepts, is their ability to recognize patterns. Math is all about rules, and rules that follow a set pattern. And if your child is able to kind of sit back and get a concept and really see the patterns that are being presented before them, then that's going to be a more mathy kid. And so you will probably want to make sure that you choose a curriculum that's going to move at their pace, that's going to give them some depth, that's going to allow them to really dig, that's going to kind of jump in concepts and assume that once it's not going to have a lot of repetition. So they may do 5 or 6 or maybe 10 problems on a concept, and then it's going to move on. It's going to assume, okay, they got it, they recognize the pattern, now we can really jump steps. Whereas a more traditional curriculum, it's not going to do jumps in steps. It's going to say, okay, now that I've taught you this concept, now I'm going to teach you an add-on. So there may be a page with 2-digit addition with carrying, and then a page with 3-digit addition with carrying. Whereas a curriculum for a Mathy kid, it may start with 2-digit addition with carrying, and then the next question may be 7 or 10-digit addition with carrying, because if you got the pattern at 2, then you should understand kind of intuitively how to continue the pattern at 10. And then a more traditional learner, that's going to be your child, they get it in the number of pages that you have available to you, and you don't tend to have to find a lot of additional resources. If your child is one where it takes them a little bit more time in math, they have some math anxiety, then you want to find a curriculum that's going to go at a more gentle pace. And a child that needs more time in math, it doesn't mean that the child is bad in math. There's a lot of reasons why some kids need a little bit more time with math concepts. Kids that have been in a traditional school setting and have been taken out of a traditional school setting to homeschool, sometimes they have some math anxiety that's come from bad experiences, or they have had math explained in a way that didn't make sense to them. Sometimes if there is a change in curriculum, whether that's in the homeschool or in a traditional school setting where you were doing math one way, and then all of a sudden there's been a big change and math is now being explained a different way, that can cause a little bit of math anxiety for students. So just because your child needs a little bit more time with math concepts, and they may need a slower curriculum or a curriculum that goes a little bit slower pace, that doesn't mean that they're bad in math. That doesn't mean that they'll never do well in math. That doesn't even mean that they won't go high in math. It just means that for now, where they are, they need a little bit more time and a curriculum that's going to move a little bit of a slower pace to give them time to really marinate on a topic and give them a time to really embrace it and find that pattern for themselves and be able to use it a little bit more. So it's not a reflection of their intelligence, and it's not a reflection of where they're going to be in the future. It's just a reflection of where they are with math in that moment. So that's another thing to consider when determining the type of curriculum that you're going to use. Another big consideration is for the teacher. Okay, if you are going to be your child's teacher for math, you want to look at where you are in math. If you are an individual where you really struggle with math, then you want to make sure that you are selecting a curriculum that's going to be at a more traditional pace, if not a slower pace. Because if it's hard for you to jump in math concepts, or if you're only a couple pages or a chapter or two ahead of your child, if you're trying to use a math curriculum that's at a really fast pace, but it's a pace that you personally don't feel that you can keep up with, then go ahead and choose a program that's going to be a fit for both the child and the teacher. Because one of the things that people sometimes think is that if your child is mathy, they will automatically be able to teach themselves any math concept they need to learn. And that's just not true. You will see this. I mean, there are people that are math majors. They're getting postdocs in math, and they still need an instructor. The reason is because as math gets more intricate, and as the rules get more strict, and as the concepts get more varied, a lot of times, even if you really understand math, you still need somebody to kind of help you along the way. Sometimes you will find that kids that find the right answer, because they're mathy, they may not be doing that work in the most efficient way. So getting the right answer isn't always the most important thing. Finding out the most efficient way to get the answer sometimes is a little bit more important. This is going to be especially true as they prepare to go into testing situations and different things like that. When you go to sit down for the SAT or the ACT or something like that, you don't get an unlimited amount of time to answer questions. So if you got every single question you answered right, but you only got through a quarter of the test because it took you a long time to get your answers, that's going to have a negative impact on your overall score. So sometimes, even mathy kids, they need a teacher that understands it. If your child struggles with math, this is another reason why you want to choose the most gentle curriculum if you're not strong in math, because sometimes it's helping them see it in a different way. Sometimes it's helping them visualize what's happening with the concepts. And another really big reason to use a math curriculum that you as a teacher are comfortable with is because you want to know why they're telling the child to do something a specific way. For instance, my kids are more on the mathy side, and we use very rigorous math curriculum. Well, because I'm mathy and my husband is mathy, we're able to really sit down and we understand why the book is telling them to answer a problem a specific way. We know what's coming next. We know what's coming, not just in the next chapter. We know what's coming in the next class and 2 and 3 classes ahead. So we're able to really sit them down, and if they don't understand why they have to do it a certain way, we really have an opportunity to explain that to them. And we do that a lot. This is something that it does tend to be a struggle with mathy kids, where they do math in their head and they don't want to write down the steps that they took to answer that problem. And so we deal with this even with Speedster, where we really had to sit him down and explain why he needs to write down the steps that he took. Because it doesn't seem like you need to write down those steps in pre-algebra, because that's kind of easy for you, but that's gonna make a whole world of difference when you get to calculus. So you may have some problems that you have to do 2 pages worth of writing to solve that one problem that you've gotten. And if you don't write stuff down, you don't know, why you took the route that you took or where you made a mistake. And so we're able to really explain to him why he has to write down his, work, why he has to show his work for a problem that he can do in his head. So, you want to really look at your level of comfort with math. And if you're not really comfortable with math, especially if you just have absolutely no comfort with math, then you really want to look at maybe doing a program that is online, or contracting out, having a tutor work with your child, or doing a program where it's going to be, they'll have a lot of video support and different things like that. Sometimes people think that they'll say, well, it's okay, I can do a teacher-led course because the answers are in the back of the book. But there have been studies that have shown that for some math programs, especially as you get into a little bit higher math, as many as 1/3 of the answers in the back of the book can be incorrect or incomplete. And so if that answer is incomplete and you're relying on the answer in the back of the book, and that answer doesn't tell the whole story, then it may be really difficult to explain that concept to the child in a way that they can understand it and be able to use that information to grow. Because math is extremely foundational, and so what you learn today you're going to use tomorrow, and what you learn this year you're going to use next year and 5 years from now. And so understanding the intricacies of everything that you do is going to be important. And so you want to yourself be extremely comfortable with it, and not just rely so much on the answers in the back of the book, but also be able to understand when an answer in the back of the book may not be right, when an answer in the back of the book may not be complete, when there may have been alternative answers. And you also want to be able to look at what the child has done, and if the answer is wrong, be able to explain to them why. Where in your answer did you go wrong? Where in that concept did you go wrong? And that's going to be a little bit easier when you're in, kind of the more foundational, 1st through 3rd or 4th grade math. But as you get into some of the upper elementary math, and definitely into the higher level math, it's not just that the answer was wrong. It's the why. Was it a calculation error? Was it a conceptual error? was it a mixing of, the distributive property versus the commutative property? So you really want to be able to see that. And if that's something that you may struggle with, then you want to rely on a program, a math curriculum, where your child will have a little bit more support from the curriculum itself. And that tends to be something that's more like an online course or an online program, sometimes even live session courses. There's a lot of live session courses that are available where your child will have a math teacher for the live course, and they can also ask questions of the math teacher as well. So that's another important aspect that you want to look at when it's time for you to choose a math curriculum, is your comfort level with math itself and with the curriculum that you're using. It has to be a match all the way around. And sometimes there will be compromise, because it may be a curriculum that your child would be great with, but you just don't feel like you're strong enough to be able to be their primary teacher, and you don't necessarily want to contract that topic out. Then that's going to let you know that you want to compromise a little bit in that concept, and maybe you have them use a more traditionally paced math program, but also do some supplemental math, using, some things like challenge math or Penrose, or, something that's going to allow them to have, some of that fun with math, or really to dig deeply in math, but it won't put as much of a strain on you as the teacher, because it's taking you too far outside of your comfort area. And there's also things just like cost. The good thing about math books is that math is not going to change. Like, we don't change. Algebra is not going to change. Trigonometry is not going to change. Addition is not going to change. Even if there are different ways that we're teaching concepts. A lot of people talk a lot about Common Core, and it's just a group of competencies, but the way in which Common Core is implemented in some ways might be different than the way people were taught traditionally. But math concepts, they don't change, and so you can use an older textbook. So if you have to buy something used, that's going to be fine. Even if you need to use a program that's more workbook based because it's consumable, well, you can always print off copy pages or different things like that. Other things that you can look at are, if you have multiple children that are going to be going through that same grade of math, you can look for something that maybe is PDF based. I know Math Mammoth, which has an option of a spiral program as well as a mastery based program. You can get PDFs, and so you can print off as many copies of that curriculum as you need. And if you get it like when it's on sale through the Homeschool Buyers Co-op, it's half price. And another thing that I want to do, especially when talking about something like Math Mammoth, if you want to take the time to read the teacher's instructions and the teacher's notes before you give the curriculum to your child. I've had a couple of people who have been a little bit frustrated with some programs because they were like, well, you said that this worked, and it's not working for us. And one is that there's definitely going to be matches, and one program may work for one family that doesn't work for another. But one of the things that I found, I got a little bit of feedback on Math Mammoth, and people were like, well, you said that was good for Mathy kids, but my kid is bored to death with it. But what happened was they didn't read the teacher's instructions, and the teacher's instructions specifically state that if your child is good in math, at the beginning of the unit, before you give them the first problem, you give them the end of unit test. And if they get an 80% or more, all you do is go over the questions that they missed, and then you move on. And so if you don't read that part and you don't do that, you're making your child do work that they really should have skipped. And so it's definitely not going to work for your child, because the author of the curriculum said that your child shouldn't be spending an entire chapter that can be 30 or 40 pages. They shouldn't be spending that time doing a concept that they already know. And so that may be why there's some frustration. You want to know, if you're using a curriculum like Art of Problem Solving, you need to know that they tell you, and they tell the child that they're going to give you questions first with zero instruction to see how you answer the question. And then after you attempt to answer the question, then they explain to you how it's done. And so if that is not known, you know, and a child is in there struggling through a question, and people are like, well, how come you don't know how to do this? Because they weren't taught. It's going with what intuitively, how do you answer this intuitively? What does your mind tell you to do when answering this question? And then we're going to tell you where in your problem solving, in your processing, you want to adjust to get the answer efficiently. And so if you don't know how the program works, it can be a little bit frustrating to try to implement it. The same with something like that we use also, Beast Academy, where, you know, it's okay, knowing what the stars mean. The stars mean that there are hints available, and the child is encouraged to try to solve the problem on their own. If they reach a level of frustration, then go with the hint and move on from there. And so those are things, you know, that's definitely one where you want to look at how the curriculum is supposed to be implemented, and then, you know, use those instructions to determine how you do it for your child, but know how the program is supposed to be implemented, and then go from there. Another thing is that know that people that are using a program, everybody's going to use their programs a little bit differently. I'm going to do a video, if I don't do it today, I'll definitely do it soon, on Speedster and his math that he's doing. He's currently doing art of problem solving, pre-algebra, but the way that he's doing it is probably going to be different than the way somebody else may be using it. He's using it with 3 of his friends locally are also using the program, and all 4 of them together are using it a little bit differently. So just know what are the tweaks that you want to really look at and are going to be best fits for your child when using the program. Does your child really like hands-on components? Well, guess what? You can use hands-on components all the way through, you know, calculus, you know, trig, Boolean algebra, you know, all of it. You can use hands-on components. Does your child learn by doing first? Does your child learn best by visuals? Do they need to get a picture of it before they really understand it? You really want to think about what are the ways that you find the curriculum that is the best fit in its current state, and then look at how you want to tweak that curriculum to fit your child even better. The biggest thing is that math is such, you know, a foundational premise for kids, especially if you have kids that are going into STEM. But even if they're not going into STEM, it's just really important to be comfortable with math. Regardless of how high you go in math, you want to be comfortable with it, because it's something that you're going to be using for the rest of your life. And the child's attitude towards math will really be a great factor in the decisions that they make and what they choose to major in and how they choose to do their work. So you really want to try to find the best fit possible, and then go with the best tweaks possible. And sometimes it's not just one curriculum. I've talked before about how my kids tend to we tend to use 2 curriculums at a time, all the time. One of the reasons is because we tend to always go with a Mathy curriculum for Mathy kids, some that go really fast, but they tend to not introduce math in a traditional format that would most likely be seen in testing. So we also have a curriculum that is going to show the kids math concepts in a traditional way, so that they're not thrown off when they go into more traditional testing, high stakes testing. And so, you know, for us, doing multiple math programs makes sense. There are some people where one math program is going to be it. There are some people where you're going to find the perfect fit and there's going to be no tweaking needed. And there's going to be some lucky people who are going to find their perfect fit at Goodwill for like 25 cents. And you're going to be set. And everybody's going to hate you because you're so awesome that you found that. But it does tend to take time. The biggest thing is that you want to make sure that if a curriculum does not fit, then you go ahead and find something that's going to fit. But you do want to make sure that you get through an entire curriculum. I know sometimes, I see people where they won't necessarily finish a curriculum. Like, let's say their child is in the, fourth grade, fifth grade, and then they get to the end of the year and they haven't finished the book. And then they say, well, we'll just move on to sixth grade. You definitely don't want to do that. You want to go ahead and finish it out, especially if your child is a more traditional learner and math is not their strong suit. You want to finish out that grade before you go to the next grade. And even if they are, in the fifth grade, but they're doing fourth grade math, or they're in the seventh grade, but they're finishing out their sixth grade math, go ahead and finish it out. And the reason is because if every year you only get through the first 4 or 5 or 6 chapters of your textbook and you never get all the way to chapter 10 or chapter 11 or chapter 12, then there's going to be really big gaps, because and this is going to be especially true if you're using a spiral approach, because spiral approaches tend to spiral in a very traditional fashion. So they will go, addition, subtraction, multiplication, fractions, division, money, percent, and so your child may every year only get through addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, but they may not get to multiplying and dividing fractions, and they may not get to, some of those concepts that tend to be more at the back of the book, and because they're concepts that are a little more not as easy to understand or not as easy to grasp, but they're going to be much more important as the child goes higher in math. So you want to try as hard as possible to go ahead and finish out the concept before you start on the new math. Go ahead and finish out those books. And another way, a lot of programs will have an end of year test. So if you didn't finish the book, you can always just give your child the end of the year test and go over whatever concepts they didn't get, go over those. So rather than having to do every single page, if you have 50 or 60 pages left in the math book, instead of having to go ahead and finish all of those 50 or 60 pages, you can give them the end of year test. And then if there's only one concept that they were struggled a little bit on, then you can go ahead and go over that concept with them. And that's going to definitely be enough. So when it comes to programs that I recommend, I tend to, I used to give people hard and fast recommendations, but now I'm not. I'm going to say you want to find the math program that's going to, answer the questions that I gave. Mastery versus Spiral. How do they want to get it? Do they want it online with a book, with a textbook? Do you want something that is going to be consumable versus non-consumable? How comfortable are you with math? How comfortable are they with math? And then answering those questions is going to lead you to a pretty good match. There's so many math programs out there. I mean, I haven't even scratched the surface of all the different types of math programs that are out there. I'm constantly seeing something new, at least, once a month, something that I've never heard of before, and some people are loving it and using it and having a great time with it. So there are so many different math curriculums that are available that you are bound to find something that you love. And even if you don't love it, if you just like it, you can get through it, especially with supplementation of different resources. So I hope this helps. I hope this is useful for someone out there. This is Dr. J, and I'm out. Bye-bye.